Look, selling is probably one of the most important elements of the investment life cycle, because it is essentially the realisation of all of your work throughout that investment. So you either crystallise a gain or you crystallise a loss, depending on how well this particular step performs. So in our view, there really are four key elements in any selling campaign, and the four elements are the price at which you put the property to the market. Getting it right, getting it wrong really can be a knife's edge. Naturally, as an owner, you always want to get the best possible price, so put a slightly ambitious price on and see how we go. The current market is such that would-be buyers will punish an owner who is being over-ambitious on price. By that, a would-be buyer will quickly rule out a property on the basis of certain elements, and pricing is key. If they think it's overpriced, they'll turn the page, go to another property and move on. And in order for you to get that buyer to come back and be re-engaged with that property, generally there's only a few options you can use as an owner to do that, and unfortunately usually the one to do that is through discounting. So a buyer will generally only come back to a property they've mentally ruled out on the basis of a perceived bargain. So the alternative to that is, well, let's be a little bit more realistic with the pricing and let's put it on for a little bit less. You sell the property in 2 days and are left wondering what might have been had you priced it more. So both of which outcomes are really not appropriate for the vendor. So getting the property priced right on the market is a particularly difficult but important element. Secondly, the process. Do I auction it, private treaty, expression of interest, tender, closed tender? All of these choices are viable choices, but depending on your local market, this is where it's important. So if you understand your local market, there's a very strong auction-oriented environment, then possibly that may be the way to go. For properties that are difficult to price or have some unique attributes to them, equally so, auction may be the way to go, because coming back to price, if it's difficult for you to price it, for the agent to price it, and you think for the buyers to price it, take the price away and consider an auction campaign. A good example of that might be where you have a property with views, water views, ocean views, harbour views. In that instance, it's very difficult to put a price on what a view is worth. So in that instance, the choice may be take the price away and let the market determine that. Presentation, that's a very important element. How the property is put to the market, the state, the condition, state of repairs, whether the property's got all your possessions and family photos on the wall. These sorts of things will influence a buyer's decision, and whether they're conscious of that or not, it will still have an impact on how they perceive the property and the feel they get from the property. And then, of course, the marketing. How do you market it? To whom? In what media? Marketing expenses can run very high, and in some cases are worth it. In other cases, may be overdone and may just be an exercise in the agent self-promoting themselves. So it's very important to get the right mix there, and in totality, those four elements make up what we would consider the four pillars. So the question then is, how do I go about putting the property on the market? Do I go to my local agent, the person who's putting the most material in your letterbox, the person who's doing the most networking that you know well? We would say no. In any given local market, there's a key set of criteria that we would look at and recommending you as an owner consider, and that transcends the letterboxing or the database calls, etc. We look at things like track record, market share, salesmanship, how proactive they are in assisting would-be buyers in finding properties. Because the way they interact with you is generally the way they're going to interact with would-be buyers for your property. So consider these things when assessing them. Generally invite in 2 to 3 of the strongest local agents based on those criteria, ask for their recommendations, look at their proposals and compare. An example of careful agent selection is in a recent case study whereby an owner who owned a freestanding house in Ashfield, they had a valuation on the property at $725. They had a local agent bring a buyer to them, and the buyer was through the agent to make an offer of $750. And the owner thought that's reasonable given it was above valuation. They chose at that point to speak to their financial planner, ask the question, and the financial planner's advice was to get some independent advice about whether that offer was commensurate with the local market, despite it being above valuation. So the owner did that, was introduced to a different selling agent who had a strong track record and those other attributes I just mentioned. And long story short, the property was put to auction. It was a very strong auction market. Clearance rates in that local market were sitting about 87%. A lot of demand, very few properties of that ilk on the market at the time. and the result under the hammer was $831,000. So in that instance, by just taking a step back and considering options, that particular owner gained $106,000 above valuation.